Okay, we're gonna get going, and we got the recording started, which is good because I feel like I'm hoping everybody else is gonna watch on that tonight. Um, yeah, so I guess this is number two, live stream number two for the new Itinerant wine club. Since we gave it a name, we should I guess chronicle what number we're on. But tonight, Pierce and I get to talk about wine, which, as everybody who's currently on this call knows, we can do obsessively and really enjoy doing it. So, we're kind of looking forward to being able to do these classes, even though we love having the winemakers on. We get to kind of interact with everybody and kind of tell, I guess, the regions or the wine stories kind of through our perspective, which we're looking forward to doing. Pierce has put together an actual presentation, which is what we guys are gonna hopefully come to expect here as we go forward, and not just straight winging it, since we're actually trying to do this thing. So I'm gonna pop that up here on the screen share. And if you guys can't see anything other than us talking here in about 1 second, let me know by either unmuting yourself or throwing it up there in the chat. Okay, I'm gonna make Nick and Kate nod their head if you can see the slideshow. Perfect.
Great job. Extra thumbs up. That was perfect.
2 thumbs up, 4 thumbs up. I don't know.
I think that was 3.
All right, so we did this one looking at up and coming red varietals. There's a lot of varietals we could have chosen. I think Tempranillo I wanted to do in large part because I think Washington Tempranillo hasn't quite caught up to Tempranillo coming out of other parts of the world, especially Spain. So I wanted to be able to kind of showcase Tempranillo from another location. And then Gamay out of Beaujolais is definitely a somm or a wine nerd's kind of
passion. That's kind of the thing. Yeah,
it's kind of an embarrassing thing because we all end up doing it. Even though we say we wouldn't do it, it happens.
Yeah.
But I think that they're beautiful wines, so we want to talk about that. And then the Malbec, I think there's maybe no better example than an up and coming red varietal than one that's kind of dictated a whole region and what they've done. So tonight we're going to talk about the Tempranillo and the Gamay, since we had the importer on last time for the Malbec. And we're going to get going. I don't know if you guys opened both bottles or just chose one to open tonight. Pierce and I have them both open, and as we go, we'll open up for questions at the end. But if you have a question in the moment, feel free to throw it out there. So here we kind of have a map of Spain, and Spain is it's kind of a fascinating wine producing country, in that I would say it's not particularly well known, but it actually in many years produces more wine than any other country in the world.
Yeah, and by acreage, it has the most grapes planted in the world. Like the vineyard area in Spain is massive, predominantly for white grapes. Which a lot of people don't know, because mostly Spanish reds are kind of the thing that get exported, but white grapes for sherry and spirits production are just a massive industry here in Spain. So we'll kind of talk about that briefly. I put way too much detail in this presentation.
He did that
more than anyone will want.
He thought just because we're talking about Rioja, people would want to know everything about Spain. So we're gonna go through this part really quick, because we didn't do this with France. We'll be back in France probably in the not so distant future. With Spain, we may not be back for a little while. I mean, you never know, but Spain's a cool region. You should get to know it. So anyway, so in this northwest part, it's right up against the Atlantic Ocean. And therefore, kind of like Seattle, is very wet compared to the rest of the country. They're known for growing their whites, again, because it's much cooler. Known for it's Albarino, which I believe in the live streams previous, we had an Albarino from, we looked at imported, had an Albarino from
Portugal.
Portugal, same grape, basically butt up right against each other. Light, fruity, kind of rounder bodied wines. Watch this. This is my mother.
So now I have to figure out.
I'm gonna do it for her. Sorry, everybody. Anyways, so yeah, so mostly the wines you would see on the shelf are Ria Spicious. I highly recommend trying those if you get your chance, especially coming into spring and summer.
Yep. So the Ebro and Douro River valleys really are kind of the topic of today's discussion. The Ebro is the main river that influences Rioja. So we'll come back to Rioja and kind of discuss that in more detail here in a couple minutes.
But I think that the Douro River Valley is an important region in Spain where you find Ribera del Duero. You're seeing they kind of buck the trend of going to your Cabernet and more international varietals, and they do it on a world-class level, and they charge accordingly.
Yeah. The northern and Mediterranean coast of Spain is a really, really cool region, really beautiful region. Predominantly known for its higher altitude vineyards and cava production. So all of the vast majority of your sparkling wine from Spain comes from this area in Catalonia. But Priorat is a really, really phenomenal producer of red wines from old vine grapes from predominantly Grenache and Carignan. Really, really, really cool wines. Again, also fairly pricey. But yeah, that it's a cool region to touch on, and we very well may visit that at some point.
Because I really like Grenache. So and he's preparing you.
I really like cava too, so.
Southern Mediterranean, this is kind of, I'm going to say they're kind of bulk region where they grow a lot of inexpensive wines from Monastral, which we know more as like Mourvèdre in this state. Can be fantastic value. As you can kind of see in the picture there, the vineyards go for probably all the way to those mountains. Just that's where they make up all that area under vine. It just goes forever. It looks awesome and is, but it's, as you can see, it's very dry. It's not an easy place to farm. So that they do the production that they do is pretty amazing.
The Central Plateau, again, is sort of leaning towards a little bit of a bulk wine region. They do really not of any of the like super famous regions are from that area. They do produce a lot of wine though. So
he threw it in there.
Yeah, I threw it in there.
I'm gonna say Andalusia, which is not pronounced in the way that should be. Sorry.
Andalusia.
There you go. I just can't bring myself to do it. I sound like such a jerk when I do that. I just can't look myself in the mirror.
Wait until he gets to the French words. It's the best.
Well, that's just embarrassing for me. It's so I would say there's very much a polarizing wine from here, which is sherry. It's kind of a wine that you either like or you find it absolutely disgusting. I lean towards liking it, although it was an acquired taste.
I think the styles of sherry that were in kind of popular vogue. Everybody kind of pictures their alcoholic aunt that had their cream sherry, and like, I don't know, it's not a pleasant image to conjure. I think that there are sherries that are capable of some really, really beautiful expressions and not typically what you would expect. It's kind of like Chardonnay in a sense where everybody assumes it's going to be this really oaky, buttery California thing, and it's capable of a lot of versatility. And sherry is a much more complex thing than just pale cream.
And if anybody wants to share some olives and some nuts and some Pinot sherry, just let me know. I'll be happy to do that with you.
We'll get out on the deck and we'll sit and we'll just drink sherry and talk about wine.
So there's some islands off the coast of Spain here that produce, I'm going to say, relatively, not famous wines. I even having studied wine obsessively know very little about this, but
most of them aren't exported Most of them get drunk locally, and I've heard that they're very good.
I think that
You'd be hard pressed to find one here.
yeah, I think the cool part about this, and the reason to put it in there, is you can kind of see on the picture the terrain. I mean, those are
Yes.
great. Those are
Yeah.
grapevines where those people are standing, and so that the terrain and the lengths they go to produce wine, it's has to be a passion project.
Yeah, it looks like a
because-
place you want to farm, right?
Yeah, it looks
You're like, man, I'd love to till that hill
dude, that looks miserable. Not gonna lie, it looks really horrible
in 110-degree weather.
in 110-degree weather. But there's probably an ocean breeze, so it's only like 102.
Yeah.
Well, now we're going to dive into Rioja. For those of you who are drinking the Rioja tonight, this will give you a perspective of where this came from and the wineries that it came from, and why we chose this area to pick Tempranillo when we could have chosen any in Spain. I have a really kind of love-hate relationship with Tempranillo, and that it's kind of like golf. I get a bunch of Tempranillos that I don't like, and then I find one, I'm like, oh my God, that is awesome.
Yeah.
And I think these wines, they kind of fit that. And I rarely get, as good a value out of some of these wines as I do out of Rioja.
Yeah.
So we are using some of Wine Folly's graphics here. I'll plug them right now. Wine Folly is a great resource. Madeline Puckett is the founder of the company. I got to interview with her one time. She didn't choose me. Apparently, I'm not good enough, which is totally fine. But
when he interviewed, he wasn't. It's fair.
But their graphics are incredibly approachable, and I even bought my mother one of her books for Christmas because they are so approachable.
They do a great job compiling information.
Exactly.
And if you want to know more about a region, they do it in a way that is really approachable and really easy to digest, and you should go buy all their stuff.
In case you didn't understand.
And also, Madeline is just a really fun person.
Yeah, and in case you didn't understand, it's very
approachable. Yeah.
Okay. So in this graphic here, you can see that in Rioja, they kind of are pretty heavy on red wine. Mostly Tempranillo. There's some Vera there, which goes by a number of different synonyms throughout the world, but none of them are particularly famous. So the star of this region really tends to be Tempranillo, and I'm going to say to a lesser extent Grenache, which is the same as Grenache. And then there's a few other red grapes, but those are really the ones that carry the lines. And you'll see that for the most part are in most blends. Do I do this one?
Sure.
That's what I thought.
Aging designations are one of the reasons that Spain is somewhat unique, and regionally in Rioja, they are very picky about aging designations. Some of this is starting to change, legally speaking, within the Rioja area, but everything was based off of quality designations that were predetermined by age in oak. So there was a minimum time that it had to spend in oak, and there was a minimum time that it had to spend in bottle after being in oak. So your sort of declassified wines, or your just base level Rioja wines, they used to be called Joven, they don't have any oak aging, and they have 1 to 2 years of bottle age. So basically the vintage after they're able to be sold. Crianza wines, which is what predominantly we see in this market and kind of probably the most often sold, the biggest sort of category for them is 1 year in oak and 1 year in bottle, and typically are fairly well priced and valued. Reserva is when it starts to get a little bit more serious, where they age it for a minimum of 1 year in oak and then 2 years in bottle. And then Grand Reserva is 2 years in oak and then a minimum of 3 years in bottle. And they start to get some pretty serious wines. Most high quality wineries in Rioja will produce their Grand Reserva with their best fruit. They'll pick that out to start and then work their way back through the other wines and the other designations, and kind of reverse engineer it that way. So their least high, their lower quality grapes are going to be sold in a base level Rioja, they're just trying to offload them and kind of recover some profit. So that is your very, very brief introduction to the aging.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because just because you buy a Grand Reserva does not mean that it's going to be better than
it just means it's older. Yeah,
it varies a little bit from house to house.
And also I should say too, Rioja has very clear defined legal designations for what Grand Reserva, Reserva Crianza, and Joven mean. Most countries that put Reserva, Grand Reserva, or any other thing on their bottle don't. So if you see a wine in the United States or in Argentina or Chile that say Reserva or Grand Reserva, legally that means nothing there. You are just taking the winemaker's word that it's better. Here in Rioja, there is at least a meaning to it. You know that wine has been aged for a minimum amount of time before they could sell it. Whether that yielded a good wine or not is left to sort of some other measures.
Yeah. So the climate of Rioja is it's dictated, I'm going to say, largely by two mountain ranges. They I think I'm going to say are mostly a blessing to the region. The Sierra Cantabria and then the Pyrenees basically shield a lot of Rioja from the weather of the Atlantic. Not so dissimilar from the way the Cascades kind of shield Eastern Washington from all our rain. And I think that's something you see with a number of different wine regions. Yeah, you're looking for that a little bit drier climate. Here, you end up with a very dry climate again. It's in Spain, you're going to see almost all of your wine regions follow rivers, with maybe the exceptions of the ones directly on the coast, because water is a huge issue there for them. In this case, we're going to follow the Ebro River Valley, though the region actually is named for the Oja River. It actually isn't what's predominantly,
yeah.
It's a tributary and hasn't really dictated the way Rio has been formed. I'm not sure. I don't know. Maybe Ebro didn't sound that good. I don't know.
I also, just to kind of add my 2 cents on the in Spain and France and Italy and a lot of the older world regions that have been growing wine grapes for a very, very long time, it's really common to see wine regions grow up along rivers, partially because they needed access to water, but partially because they needed access to trade routes, and rivers allowed them to get the wine out.
Very accurate.
So in the older regions before modern shipping was a thing, that was also a huge factor. So that's why you see a lot of older wine regions pop up around that stuff. So,
yeah. It's the reason Burgundy wasn't a thing in the UK and Bordeaux was.
Exactly.
So Rioja is split into three regions. Rioja Alta, Rioja Alvesia, and Rioja Baja, which I think they recently named
Oriental.
Yeah, Oriental. I don't know.
It's the eastern region.
Yeah, it's cool. Anyways, so the other big thing here at play for Rioja is altitude. Rioja Alta, unsurprisingly, is higher than Rioja Baja, and Alvesia is also fairly high in elevation, and kind of abut the Cantabria mountains there.
I think I put in a map down below.
Let's find out.
Hey, look at that. I put in a map down below.
So you can kind of see geographically how the mountains kind of move in there on kind of both sides of Alta and Alvesia, and then Oriental kind of pushes away from the more topographical areas of Rioja. One of the things about that that's kind of, I think, been again a blessing for Rioja is that they over the course of the time that they've been growing grapes there, decided that Tempranillo would grow much better in the higher elevations. It didn't over ripen, and Grenache, even though it tends towards gaining a lot of alcohol in warmer areas, it balanced out the Tempranillo, which is why you see those two kind of blended together.
Yeah, and it also helped with Tempranillo being in largely in higher elevation areas because the diurnal shift is greater. So it's a little cooler at night and really warm during the day, which promotes ripening, but the cool nights also help retain acidity, which generally create a more mineral driven kind of more complex wine that retains its acids a little better. So it ends up being a little more balanced.
And more elegant.
More elegant. Yep. Put it in red there.
Yeah, good job.
Yep.
Should make sure I didn't miss anything when I was like on a rant there.
Think
Oh yeah, no, I did.
You did?
Soils.
Yeah.
The soils do vary somewhat largely between these regions again. My recollection without reading through this is that there you're looking for the calcareous and kind of clay mixture. So it's kind of that limestone based soil with clay, where you're seeing more limestone and clay mixtures kind of in Alta and Alvacia, and then you're kind of losing some of that limestone. You're also going to a more ferrous driven clay or red clay as you kind of decrease in altitude.
Yeah,
and that again, some grape growers would say that the soil makes the wine, and other grape growers would disagree. I think that this region kind of showcases a little bit of
I think Baja and Oriental and really it promotes fruitier wines. It's much more I think they're meant and intended to be drunk young, and just kind of they're sort of the porch pounder Spanish wines, and
that your aunt that drinks sherry drinks.
Yeah, exactly. And the Tempranillos that are from Alavesa and Alta are they tend to be more age worthy and more herbal and savory in their youth, and not necessarily as approachable. So
I'm gonna let Pearce rip on the Finca San Martin here, because he studied their websites far more in depth than I did.
They're super cool winery. I didn't know a ton about them until we started tasting through the wines for this process, and learning about these guys. They've been around since 1890. There were 5 Riojan and Basque families that put together the sort of initial plan for creating a wine empire, really. They went in with a much bigger idea than just starting to make some wine. I also thought it was cool and just noted that the first president of the company back in 1890 was a woman, Doña Saturnina Garcia Cide Garate, which I thought was really cool. And their first winemaker was French. So they were like, no, they do know what they're doing over there. So yeah, this wine, I put kind of just some quick notes about what the process was for making this wine. I also did note one of the cool things that we didn't quite touch on yet, but one of the unique characters of Rioja specifically is they use a lot of American oak barrels. A lot of regions in the world don't use American oak,
including America,
including the United States. Yeah, it's a kind of a more potent oak. Typically, our cooperage just kind of makes it that way, and the way that the forests and the clones of oak trees that we have tend to present is more in like a coconut and dill and sweeter vanilla character. Whereas French oak tends to be more in the vanilla and baking spices and kind of toast notes. So this does have a high percentage, the 60%, and of French oak, and then 40% American. So this is actually a hybrid wine, which is pretty rare in. Did I flip flop that?
Yeah,
I flip flop that. Anyway, so it's pretty rare to see hybrid blends of oak in Rioja. Typically, they're 100% American oak, and that's regionally regionally driven by some sort of historical factors where they had a trading dispute with France and couldn't get French oak for a long time. And so it kind of became traditional to take oak from the Americans, and it kind of stuck around. It's being played with more and more now, where you can kind of create some different things.
The European Union has kind of dictated that France should trade barrels with Spain.
Well, yeah, I mean, there was that whole revolution they had like 50 years ago too, so that probably changed things. Anyway. I was going to see if there was anything I wanted to.
Go ahead. Okay. Go ahead. So for some of you, you might be drinking the Coteau de Maz. We did initially put out that we were doing 2-tier levels, and we still are. So the Coteau de Maz, I think, is it's a step up in quality from the Finca San Martin. I think the place I noticed it the most is actually in their use of oak, where they very clearly used a lot more new oak. And I would say that there are very few wines that I've had that I would say are more true in style traditionally than this wine for Rioja. When I tasted that,
it's a dead ringer.
Okay, that's what I would expect on a blind tasting exam if they were trying to get me to find Rioja. That's what that tastes like. It was 100% Tempranillo. It looks like they fermented both mostly in stainless steel tanks, and I would say 18 days of maceration really isn't particularly long for how big that wine is.
Yeah, that's
but it looks like they pumped over versus punching down, and that can help that extraction, which is why they only used 18 days. Again, Pearce researched this, so I was just kind of reading the notes there. But and I don't know a ton about them. But
this is
that's
their
compound.
Super cool winery, right? Right.
Yeah.
So the really interesting thing is a lot of the expansion. So the original winery building is the one that's kind of the furthest down on the picture. The buildings behind that were added later. The cool thing is, so in 2004, Coteau de Rioja became the largest winery in Rioja. They have since, I think, been overtaken. I don't remember by who. But the cool thing is that building that you see way back off in the distance there is a building that they built specifically to house red wine, and white wine. They started a major white wine program in the kind of the late 2010s, and are really pushing their white wine program and starting to do sparkling wines. So they wanted their processing facility really, really close to the vineyard. So they built one, which is awesome to have that much money. So it's a really cool spot, but they just have a phenomenal facility and some great history. And
I think this is something you're seeing in Rioja, and I would say also in Riviera del Duero, which we talked about. You're seeing people who have money, kind of like in California, are building massive wine estates, and that's kind of become a thing. And I don't know if they decided they were going to do that because they wanted to be Bordeaux, just like Napa wanted to be Bordeaux, or what have you. But it's leading to some just really awesome facilities, and probably honestly raising the quality of wine in the area.
Oh, for sure.
The notoriety.
It's cool too, because even Finca San Martin and Coteau are both very large wineries in Rioja.
Large to the point where they're bigger than any winery in Washington.
Yeah. So to put that in perspective, I don't actually know what the vineyard area is in Washington right now.
I don't either.
But Spain has, Rioja by itself has 152,000 acres devoted to grapes. So it's a chunk.
And that's
one of the smaller regions in Spain. It's pretty wild.
So
moving on. Any questions?
Any questions on Spain?
About Spain? Rioja, comments, concerns?
Yeah, concerns is how much we talked about Spain.
I think I got the wrong wine.
Well, now we're going to move into France, Beaujolais specifically here. As I said earlier, we're not going to go kind of all around the country in France because we expect to be back, though.
Well, and we'd also be here all night.
Legitimately all night. I think it won't be this year that we're back in France, but it'll be soon because I
We might
wouldn't-
visit Alsace.
we might visit Alsace. Chris might be right. I might have just lied to you guys.
Yeah.
I apologize. So, I mean, France, as we know, is kind of really, I'm going to say the home of wine as we know it today. It's not where we first grew grapes, but it is where we kind of disseminated standards.
Yeah, wine did a lot of growing up in France.
Wine did a lot of growing up in France for a plethora of reasons. But I think that's why I tend to come back to it as a wine lover. It's like going back to your roots. You taste these varietals from different areas, and then you go back to France and you find out this is why they chose to grow that varietal.
Yeah, totally. I can't remember if I put it down in here. I didn't. There was a stat on the website that I was reading through, and they were saying that if you tried one wine from France every night, like I think 5 days a week, you would still take like 8 years before you tasted all of the different kinds of wine in France, and then you have thousands of wineries that each produce.
Just think if we were trying to do that in Italy forever, right?
Yeah, it's pretty
crazy.
Yeah.
You want to do the intro here?
Yeah. So Beaujolais is kind of a relatively obscure region in France. And I guess I say that specifically because some of the well-known regions in France are the most well-known regions in the world. So it's known for really easy drinking, mass-produced red wines that are released the third Thursday of every November. It's called Beaujolais Nouveau, and it's pretty bad wine, but it went through this sort of popular marketing explosion, and it's really kind of a fascinating marketing thing to study, because in the 70s, like Beaujolais Nouveau was the thing.
I think that was kind of a byproduct of the time, because you see other wines in that period of time that were doing something similar, though, right? Like
yes, that's true.
Your Blue Nun relief, the relief from Mill.
Yeah.
So that's what the population wanted. They didn't they weren't necessarily looking for fine wine. They were looking for wine that was easy to drink and just fun.
Yeah,
let's get drunk.
Very true. So Beaujolais is a lot more than Beaujolais Nouveau, and there's certainly a push for it to be recognized as such now. I really enjoyed this quote. Beaujolais is very much the smallest house in the fanciest neighborhood, bordered by Burgundy to the north and the Saône River to the east, and it's right near Lyon, so it's the gastronomic capital of France, and it's just kind of this really cool region that's kind of sandwiched between Burgundy and the Rhone Valley, and they make some cool wines. They really do.
Yeah.
And so they've broken it up into a few different classifications, which we'll get into down below.
Yeah. So on the map here, I just kind of contextually, you can kind of see size relation, to like Bordeaux and Burgundy. You see for how small Burgundy is, the notoriety it gets. But Beaujolais is not very big either. And I mean, you can see really the honest truth is it's just an extension of Burgundy that the Burgundians decided that they didn't want to include because they were being super elitist, and that was the smallest house. And that's really kind of the truth of it. They grow a different grape, but the qualities, I think.
It's also a symptom of politics too, with Napoleonic law that you don't want to get into, because I don't even want to get into it. I think it's kind of a weird, weird thing.
It's true. So I think the thing to kind of take home here about the wines we're drinking is these are not what you're going to get if you go by Beaujolais Nouveau. Very much not. But these kind of areas that we chose them from are, I think in many ways they would say they're good because of the soils that they have. We kind of go back to that. There's this big, it's called the Massif Central. And it's this big kind of mountainous plateau that runs right up to Beaujolais. And the best areas are kind of, I'm going to say, the finger-like extensions of granite that are coming off of this kind of big flat mountain in the middle of the country. And basically, almost all of your 10 crews that are in Beaujolais have these granitic, schisty soils that are very, very rocky, kind of lending themselves to higher quality for, again, many different reasons, but mostly they limit how much vegetative growth the plant can kind of endure, and helps them to kind of maintain a more moderate crop load.
Yeah, and so they're broken up into two major areas, kind of the north and south, by the river. The south has much more clay and marl soils, so it's much more fertile and rich. And a lot of your more bulk wines, so your Beaujolais village designation, which we'll get into, and your Beaujolais base level and Beaujolais Nouveau come from that southern area. And then those designated areas up in the north are kind of each unique in their own right. So
strangely unique. So the history here is not unlike, I'm going to say, many French regions, or probably many European regions. Romans brought grapes because they like to be drunk, is really the truth of it.
I think the point is that life was pretty terrible in the Middle Ages.
Yeah, that's probably a good point. But then, per the norm, again in Europe, the monks, probably due to mostly boredom, decided that they were going to grow grapes, and not only really going to grow grapes, they were going to grow the best grapes.
Yep.
And so they did. And for whatever reason, in Beaujolais, they decided Gamay noir, the grape we're working with here in our Moulin à Vent and Fleury, was going to be the best grape. And it's hard for me to disagree with that. Those guys, again, had hundreds of years to do it, but they got it right. So this talking about trade routes, you may be able to hear my very small golden retriever drinking all the water in the background. So if you can, I'm sorry. But again, so Beaujolais couldn't really get their wine out because while they were on the Saône River, it wasn't a big enough river to really kind of export their wine. To the coast, either coast. And so just like Burgundy, once the railroad was built in the 19th century, as it says there, that's when those regions kind of started to flourish and really be able to make a name for themselves. Burgundy obviously has, to the tune of it being the most expensive wine in the world, for some bottles, and Beaujolais has kind of followed that. So here's what Pearce was talking about with the different classifications. So you can kind of see in this pie chart here, Beaujolais Nouveau still makes up a lot of the vineyard area, well over half, followed by Beaujolais Village, and then the Beaujolais Crus. There's 38 different, I guess you would call them, distinct growing regions within the villages. I don't remember exactly how they chose to designate those. I think it's largely due to just them decreasing the amount of grapes produced. And it doesn't have anything really to do with the geography outside of that, where the Beaujolais Crus do to some extent. This is kind of talking about the Beaujolais, the AOP, the Beaujolais Nouveau areas. The way they make these wines, and the reason that they release them so fast, is they go through a process that's a little different fermentation wise. They do something called carbonic maceration or semi-carbonic maceration.
Detailed it below too.
Perfect. We're gonna go find that.
Yeah, skip ahead to it.
We're gonna skip ahead that and always roll back here. Like where?
Why does Beaujolais taste like bananas?
So here's why Beaujolais tastes like bananas. So carbonic maceration is kind of a neat technique that they employ. And actually, while many winemakers would probably not totally fess up to it in this state, more and more of us with our own varietals are kind of doing something like this, where we're doing a whole cluster fermentation, and it's allowing it to be a little
It's just
lighter.
like a semi-carbonic kind of process where it allows the without getting too deep into the science, kind of the beginning of the process to happen and letting it sit like that for a little while, and then going in and doing traditional, finishing it off with a traditional fermentation.
It's cool because what you're actually doing is you're displacing the ability of the yeast to ferment by excluding oxygen and creating CO2 gas. In some cases, the Beaujolais Nouveau, they actually seal the tank and pump it full of CO2 and force it down that route. In other cases, the grapes at the bottom get crushed. A little CO2 is made from the yeast, and then they go through that process for the grapes that aren't crushed. For the fermentations actually happening intracellularly. So in this case, it's happening without the berry getting squished at all. That only happens up to about 2% alcohol, and then the grape kind of actually kills itself.
Yeah, it kind of explodes.
Yeah,
cool.
It just turns itself to mush, and then the yeast have at it. So you get these kind of lifted fruity flavors, which can be kind of in the form of bananas.
Cherry liqueur is really common.
Cotton candy.
Yeah, bubble gum.
Yeah, those are kind of these weird kind of,
all the things you want in a wine.
Yeah, exactly. I like them. I think they're unique and kind of fun. But
I do too.
So that's kind of the idea behind Beaujolais Nouveau. You're just making a very fun, easy to drink wine in a style that's kind of unique.
It also happens fast. The reason that they kind of mentioned that Beaujolais Nouveau is the fastest wine in the world is it goes from vineyard to bottle and to market within like 2 months.
That's actually incredible,
which is kind of insane.
Yeah,
some of our fermentations weren't done in 2 months. So it's a unique thing in that it is a red wine that is made in a way that is so quick to process that it's actually on store shelves by Thanksgiving. And that wasn't necessarily the purpose of it, but that third Thursday in November is like, that's the date. And then legally speaking, it has to all be sold by the following August or it's dumped.
No
and
pressure.
It's just kind of a weird, cool thing that's just it's been around for a long time. It's kind of fun.
Yeah. So the Beaujolais Village AOP, which we're talking about, it's really not any more complex in that they've chosen to make a slightly more serious style of wine. And they're doing this by reducing crop load or doing less carbonic maceration.
More of the semi-carbonic.
Yep. And so you're getting a little bit more there. They do have some granite or schist coming into some of these areas, but not predominantly such that you would see in the crus here. There are 10 crus, and they vary somewhat dramatically stylistically, where you will get it's Saint Amour or Saint Amour tends to be one of the lighter ones.
Yeah.
Or your Cheruba.
True. Yeah.
Is also very light in style. Or you go to the ones we picked, which were Moulin Avant, Fleury, Morgon, are fairly serious red wines. They still have some of the hallmarks of your I'm going to say kind of Burgundian wines, where you're getting some acid and kind of those fruity red characters, but they still have
some complexity though with forest floor and herbal kind of tendencies as well.
And I most importantly really like them.
They're delicious.
So you guys have been subjected to them for really that reason.
Yeah.
I'll let you take these two here real quick.
Yeah. So Moulin Avant it's actually kind of the picture of Moulin of Beaujolais that I showed right at the top with Beaujolais is actually the picture of the windmill that gives Moulin Avant its name. So it's from that windmill. And it's a really kind of a neat region. And I think really been known as the top dog of Beaujolais Crus. It's got really neat soils with pink granite and quartz. The wines are always really structured. They're definitely the most long-lived of the wines from Beaujolais, so it can really kind of cellar the best out of many of them.
With maybe Morgon.
Morgon is up there for sure. But they're just a little different. It's a fuller bodied example, really just kind of heavy, dense, dark fruits, violets. And as it ages, it really kind of is a cool wine in that it goes to these kind of earthy, truffly meat and spice and dried fruit notes. So it's a fun wine.
The other wine that some of you got was from Fleury. They call this one the Queen of Beaujolais, though I'm really not sure why.
Because it's pretty. Fleury means flowers, dude.
Yeah, but which one's king?
Girls like flowers. Get Moulin Avant. It's King of Beaujolais.
Don't think that's true.
This is also a wine folly thing. I think they named it that. So
I'm going to field this question real quick.
Yep.
Actually, neither of us distribute this wine, though we are friends with the people who distribute it. I'll go with that. But can get either of these wines for whoever wants them.
As with any of the other ones, if there's something that you guys liked, let us know. We're more than happy to help you get it. So the Moulin Avant is made by Yohan Lardy, which is this lovely looking young Frenchman, tending his bush vines, which are super, super cool.
That's actually something we didn't talk about in Spain, and we should have. And it happens to be a nice overlap here.
Yeah,
most
bush vines everywhere.
Yeah, so they train their vines a little bit differently than what we would see here. Though you see more of that kind of moving into the area, but traditionally they train them in what's called bush or goblet, where you have the thick stalk coming up out of the ground, obviously not particularly tall. The head's kind of, I'm going to say maybe just above knee height, and then it has like these fingers that kind of come out like this, and you get the different shoots each year coming off of these fingers. Really, honestly, I think it's the coolest looking training style. It's also kind of a pain.
Maintaining them is really
difficult. Very hard. And if you're not in a very dry climate, you will get robbed. But back to Yohan.
Yeah, they're a pretty cool. Bush vines are a pretty cool way to grow grapes. And yeah, like you said, it's great in hot climates because the fruit gets a ton of shade from the leaves. But if it's wet at all, you'll just get bunch rot. So this is Yohan Lardy. This winery is a generational winery. So this is the son. I do not, for the life of me, remember his father's name, but he started it, and they have been working together for a number of years. It's a really cool vineyard. It's one single close, so one single vineyard site surrounded by a rock wall, and poppy flowers, because it's just, they've got to have that extra nice thing.
Or maybe they're making something on the side.
Yeah,
it's part of the story.
It's possible. This wine, all the grapes were handpicked, vinified with native yeasts. They say they didn't add sulfites. They're probably lying about that, but I'm fine with going with it.
Does it actually say no sulfites on the bottom?
I don't know. This is from.
It says right on the bottle contains sulfites, so they were lying.
They were lying on their website, flat out. That handsome man right there is a liar.
But he's very nice.
He makes great wine. 10 months in traditional neutral Burgundy barrels, and I really enjoyed this one.
Yeah, and you can kind of see the kind of behind his leg there, that kind of pinky rock. That's like kind of consistent with what we're talking about with Moulin Avant, and it's
that pink granite and schist.
Yeah, that's very, very rocky.
Yep.
Well, shoot, that's nice.
I know. Again, the other bottle we included is this Fleury that we're looking at, and that's Chateau de la Chaise. I probably said that wrong, but it's one of the most historic Beaujolais sites, and they've been doing this for a very long time. And again, I highly recommend you kind of check this producer out with a little bit more detail. They're do some pretty cool stuff. Their winemaking is actually really similar to Yohan Lardy, but they do everything is kind of at the height of technological. It's really precision winemaking, and you like you said, you kind of see more and more of that with some of these really big estates. They just do some really neat technological stuff with the wines. So yeah,
and also Beaujolais became trendy amongst, I'm going to say, Psalms, in large part because, as you'll see here on this slide, the organic production,
the organic and biodynamic is a huge
pretty
thing.
ubiquitous in Beaujolais, but it's not because my opinion is it's not because they're super conscious about it, but because it's super easy to do it there. The climate just lends itself to being able to not have a lot of disease pressure. That's predominantly why you see that there in most producers. The one thing that they do face a lot, and as recently as 2 vintages ago, I think it was 19, is hail.
Oh man.
And then basically wiped out a whole vintage. Like one storm came through in a day and just basically
15 minutes.
15 minutes
destroyed everything in the vineyard. Hail is one of the worst things that you can get near harvest. What happens is, one, it can destroy the leaves because it just can kind of rip right through them, but it can also just damage the skins of the grapes. And once those skins are damaged on the grapes, rot sets in really fast, and pretty much your whole harvest is just done. A couple of years ago, it also happened in Bordeaux.
And Burgundy.
And Burgundy a little actually ahead of harvest, but still it wiped out, I think, 70,000 hectares of
140,000 acres.
140,000 acres of grapes in 15 minutes. So yeah, it can be kind of a rough thing. So that's the end of the slideshow. So again, huge shout out to Wine Folly and Madeline Puckett for putting together a lot of this information and making it super easy for me to help share it with you guys. Any questions? You guys are making me feel like I should ask a question so I can answer it.
Pearce, which one of these 2 wines tonight do you like better?
Oh yeah. Which one of the 2 wines, if any of you opened the second one or have had both, if you drank it first, any favorites, anything that you guys like or don't like?
Man,
crickets, dude.
Yeah,
that's rough.
Oh wait, there he goes, getting ready.
Well, Kate unmuted me apparently.
I know. I know.
Thank you, Kate.
I thought he was going to tell us his favorite wine.
Nick, no, he is going to now.
Nick,
he's got no.
You didn't know it, but I was staring right at you. I was like, okay, anybody? Nick.
This was our favorite so far tonight. Was the Rioja. It's very good.
Yeah.
Actually, like when we first poured, it actually reminded me a lot of like an Italian wine, just because it's very kind of dry. It's kind of got that vinegary taste to it.
Yeah.
Very sour cherry, like and almost like underripe plum kind of character to it. Yeah, definitely typical of those regions.
It really is. It definitely tastes like an old world wine.
Yeah, very good. I think the other one just kind of threw us off. We had this crew from you guys. Just I think you kind of just tend to stay away from the more florally stuff, and got very like floral and what was it you said tasted like?
Like the banana is exactly what I got out of it.
Yeah.
It's just a weird thing to get
from
wine, but it's not bad. It's still good. It's just different.
Like we couldn't have picked almost two more different wines. Like I was actually talking with a wine shop that I sell wine to, and I was talking about this presentation, and I was like, yeah, I'm talking about Gamay Noir and Tempranillo, and specifically Beaujolais and Rioja. And they were like, why at the same time? Like they're not at all the same. And I was like, yeah, it just kind of happened that way.
No,
we
it's the
we
truth.
just kind of put it together. So
No, totally true. I happen to, I don't know, it's probably my father's fault. I kind of gravitate towards these lighter styles of wine that are kind of, I guess, or floral. I don't know what that says about me, but it's the same thing with beer, actually.
a little light loafers.
I don't know.
It's fine.
Yeah, my friends would criticize me. They're like, what do you mean you don't like IPAs as much?
Yeah.
I just don't like IPAs as much. So.
He didn't say that in Daniel's voice, but it was Daniel's voice. Why don't you like beer?
True story.
Because I'm not as bitter as you said.
What's
Yeah.
your guys' favorite?
Man, I think I gravitate heavily towards the Beaujolais. That Milanavant Yohan Lardy wine is just really nice. But I'm heavily on a Pinot Noir kick right now, and that really lands for me in kind of a more similar Pinot Noir style.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same.
So that's kind of,
It's probably partially because we're working with a bunch of heavy, bigger wines in the winery.
yeah,
So-
that's true. And a lot of the wines I sell are big wines. Being from Washington, they're pretty intense, and a lot of cabs and merlots and things in that vein. So,
But honestly, which this is going to be saying a lot for me because I don't really like Malbec. My favorite wine of the three might have been the Malbec.
that Paris Malbec was
I-
That was really good.
Really liked that one. I was very impressed by that wine. I mean, even when we first tasted it with the distributor, I'm like, that one, we want that one.
Mhm.
yeah, that was they did an awesome job there.
Yeah.
So
So
it's hard to miss. I like all three.
we have one of those coming up in the next one too, where we just have been sitting down with the distributors for the next go.
Mhm.
And there was one, I'm like, that's the one we want.
Yeah, that one.
So
We'll take that
you
one.
guys will find out later on. But,
Yeah.
But yeah, so anyways, hopefully people get to make the recipes. I'm sorry those got out as late as they did this time. They will come out
Way sooner.
this next time. We switched people who are going to help us with that. So, but yeah, I'm looking forward to the next set wines of the West Coast, which could mean a lot of different things since every state except for Oregon produces like every grape. But you guys find out what that's going to be like. So.
Yeah, I know. Somebody brought us a Columbia Gorge
Dolcetto. We
and I
won't
was
be
like-
having that one. Don't
I was
worry.
like, oh yes, the wine everyone in Washington's looking for, that Dolcetto from Columbia Gorge. That's certainly a classic.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, I've never even had this.
No, but we're looking forward to it. We're tasting some good wines. We got some wineries we're gonna kind of call that we visited before and see what we can put together. So
We're gonna do some fun stuff.
yeah. So thanks for joining us. The question is, what's Dolcetto?
So-
From my mother.
Yeah,
no
right.
less.
Okay, so Dolcetto is a red varietal from really largely Piemonte in
Northwest Italy.
Northwest Italy. So it's one of three main varietals that you'll find in that area. So it's the earliest ripening grape in the areas that they grow Barolo and Barbera in.
Well, so Barbera and Nebbiolo.
Yeah. Sorry. Thank you. Nebbiolo. So it's typically Dolcetto. The way they kind of have it, Dolcetto ripens and is done with fermentation right around the time that Nebbiolo is coming into the winery. So they can kind of flip everything and go pretty fast. It also has the lowest, kind of aging designations on it. It's kind of meant to be drunk young. It's a yummy wine. Italian Dolcettos.
We're gonna get into that region of the world the last quarter of the year.
We will, for sure.
Who doesn't love really good Italian wine?
Literally nobody.
Yeah.
Everybody likes Italian wine.
If you don't, you just don't like wine.
Yeah.
So anyway, well, thanks for everybody joining us, and thanks for everybody who's gonna watch the recording. And I highly recommend trying those pairings out. I'm gonna do it. And like we said, if anybody wants to get their hands on more of these wines, we're happy to throw an order in for everybody, and I can let you guys know what the pricing would be if you have interest. And then if you have any friends who want to join, send them my way, and we'll throw them in on the next one. But we're having a great time putting it together, and yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thank you guys. It's always fun.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.